When I was growing up, my dad had the idea that cities were very bad. So we lived out in the country. The little area was called Greens Bayou. It became swallowed up by Houston. But at that time, it was very country. The neighbors were not close. I felt a little isolated growing up because my friends were lizards and squirrels. So it was very rural, but I think that I love nature, and I think that was a big imprint on me. When I got to school, I had to ride a bus. So I envied the children that lived in, in the suburbs that had a swimming pool that was within walking distance. But then when I was in high school, I was very active in speech. Speech was a very fulfilling kind of an event because you could win trophies, you could win awards. It wasn't until later that I thought of myself as a painter. Actually, when my son was little, I had some time on my hands. I went back to school and I just threw myself into taking every class that University of Houston Clear Lake offered, whether it be painting, or whether it be drawing, or whether it be clay, or whether it be sculpture. I took every course that I could take, but my first loves are the drawing and the painting. Whenever I was in high school, the yearbook people came up to me because I was always doodling in class if I was bored, and so I had to do some of the illustrations in the yearbook because they knew that I could do that. So, and one of my friends said a remark which I thought was very strange. I told her that I was majoring in art, and she said, well, you know, Vivian, you can't be successful because you're not a man and you're not gay, you know. So at that point I thought, well, I still want to be an artist. So mostly some of my commissions have come from my friends and relatives, or word of mouth, that people have seen my art and then they've asked me to do a special painting. Like one friend lost her husband, he died, and I was working on a big bouquet of yellow roses, and she said, I like that, but what I want you to do is I want you to put his profile into that painting, into one of the roses. So I said, okay, I can do that. And so that was special to me because it was personalized for her. Okay, I have kind of a mixed reaction when you talk about Texas. Growing up, I always felt like Texas had kind of a hick quality, that it wasn't sophisticated. I think I liked to see plays, I liked to know what was going on in New York City. I think it would be culture shock for me to try to move to New York because I'm used to the open spaces. It would be very hard for me to live in a little cramped, tiny New York apartment. And how could you grow flowers? I like to grow flowers. So some of me is kind of country or traditional in terms of growing up in Texas. I like the open spaces. I don't like narrow-mindedness. I don't like that part. So some things about growing up I didn't like in terms of a narrow vision. I like cosmopolitan. I have traveled to Europe and Mexico and to several places outside the continental, outside the United States. So I've always found that thrilling. So my home base is Texas. I like to come back to Texas, but I enjoy that interplay of new and different. Well, I think that my first shows were anywhere anyone would let me do a show. I did go with the circuit of fairs, open air, bring your own tent display of art. I did show with the university, the student shows, but in terms of galleries, there were galleries that I was showing in, and the tricky part is the gallery going to be open long enough for you whenever they shut down because they've gone bankrupt to get your art out. So I have been showing in the Gulf Coast area in various places. I did show I did participate with Watercolor Art Society, which is very nice organization, and I think that helped me grow in terms of technique. You know, once you get your degree, you technically have a stamp of approval that you know which end of the brush to use. But the years of seeing the guest artists that have written books, that have been on the circuit, seeing their special techniques, you can pick and choose which of those techniques you want to add, and you can appreciate the techniques that takes really a lifetime to master. I started with oil paint. I loved the colors you could get with oil, but when my son was little, he would eat the paint. So I didn't want to keep calling poison control, so I put up my oil paints. And at first, watercolor was my second choice because I love the luminous, rich, creamy colors of oil. So watercolor started out as a second choice because I could paint on it while he was sleeping or while he was away at school, and then I could put it all away when he came home. So the idea that it was portable and that I could do it in bits and pieces. If I had the oil out, all it would take would be you know, it being tumped over or smeared or eaten in that case. Yes, it's a great joy. Sometimes it's a disaster, but it's also a risk whenever you're facing a piece of white paper. There's nothing there. So there is that artist block. Before you begin, before you have your big idea, there's nothing. But once you're into the process, like spilling and dripping and pouring and blending, all that tactile sensation is very thrilling to me. I love color. I love to produce flaming reds or screaming magentas or lizard greens. All the colors are appealing to me, and it takes a while to get them to harmonize and to get them to behave. And sometimes you just don't want them to behave. You want them to boldly express a feeling, an emotion. Well, you know, there are many subjects. I like photography and I take lots of pictures whenever I go on vacation, or even if I'm not on vacation. If something interests me, I will take a picture, or maybe a half dozen pictures. This simmers in the back of my mind. It's sort of like, I could do that, I could do something with that, but there are only a few that reach the level where I decide, okay, I'm going into my studio. This I'm going to explore. So once you do one, like when I did the tarot series, I was looking to unravel my feelings, and so I started doing a self-tarot. I selected cards. I knew a little bit about it. I'm not heavily into tarot, but I loved the symbolism and the meanings. So I was sorting things out, and so I combined cards the way I wanted to, and I hope when someone looks at my images, they can figure out a semblance of something similar as to what I mean. I don't want to have to explain it to them. I want them to get it just by looking and just by thinking about what they see. Well, I love my older brother a lot, and he passed away recently, so that became a top priority. His son is still alive, and his son now has the painting I painted of him and his wife. So I think I'm drawn, you know, if I feel strongly about a person, I think I'm going to step up to the plate and do a better job than if it's just a generic person that I see. But sometimes, even from a newspaper, I am inspired by something I see. It grabs me, or I flip through a magazine. If an image is appealing to me, it may propel me to get out my brush and start painting. So there are many images you see in your workaday world or at home or watching television, but not many of them you just erase. You reload and do something else. Some of them touch you, and I think it's emotion that's the key mover in my life. Friendswood, where I live now, the oldest building is the parish house of the Friends Church. So Verla Perry, who is a relative of that original family, said, "Vivian, will you do this?" So I said yes, because it was my community, it was where I live, and there were other muralists that were involved. Yes, it's not the Sistine Chapel, but it is close to home. A popular workshop that I do is teaching other people how to paint with silk dyes on silk. And this does require some special equipment, like a big pot to boil water in. It's sort of like fixing menudo or tamales. You need a pot to boil water to steam and set the color of the silk dyes in the silk. It's wearable art. People can wear scarves or caftans or other garments, or you can make it into a painting. But I love the colors. It's very similar to watercolor. In fact, there are effects that you can get with dropping salt in. There are many beautiful, and silk as a fabric is very luminous. You get gorgeous colors, so it's a very popular course. I also have done watercolor, I have done pastel. I even taught in the prison these big burly men. It was a pastel class. It was very entertaining for me. There was a range of levels of performance. Some people were excellent because they had lots of time on their hands. And I had one that painted a very Picasso-esque way, but I don't think he was conscious of why his paintings looked like Picasso. So I have taught from the very little kindergarten age group to college age and retirement age student populations. One of the subjects that I have often talked about is art. I'm an art historian by day, so I have talked about modern art. I have talked about ancient art, Stone Age, any period of art from the beginning of recorded time to modern. I especially am fond of American art because I live in the United States. So those are topics. I have also taught public speaking, interpersonal communication, those kind of topics. Even clay. I have dabbled with clay, so I have done raku, how to do raku. I did do lithography, but and I do limited printmaking. My webpage is www.paintingsbypollock.com. My email is vivian.pollock, Pollock, @hccs.edu.